All right, so we're ready here. You're welcome to this year's event of decentralization, the future of leadership, commerce, and finance. It is very important, for us to emphasize the fact that, well, this was taken in the year 2000, and as we are preparing for the next decade, it is imperative and it's important for us to note that there are certain things that will begin to happen in which we need to, begin to take cognizance of. And so this session is just a bit to help us to understand, what is expected of us, and how we're supposed to get things on. My name is Harkheindzel Kenny Omiyale, and I will be the one taking through this session. So let's get it ready and let's get it started, shall we? Okay, there's a bit we might need to talk about decentralization. And I'm sure some of you might have been hearing things of that wise before. But let us just get on with it and we move on as time permits. I really do not want to spend too much time on this, but we're going straight into the crux of the matter. This is a live session right now, but the next time, possibly a few people might be listening to it. It might be the recorded session. So that is still all right, and that is still fine. It's still fine to get things on the way and how things work. So let's just kick it off. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is kind of how a decentralized network works. Okay, so you do not have a central point that controls how everything works. The basic thing that we're used to is a centralized system. Basically, what does a centralized system mean? A centralized system means that there is a central point of power, of control, and of resources, to the point that when that central point is taken out of the system collapses. And that's one of the bad things, or the disadvantages of a centralized network. However, it will be unfair of me to not emphasize the importance of a centralized network. The world as we have it pretty much now has been built on centralized networks. And the centralized system hasn't really done that bad, it's been responsible for the advancement in technology and everything that we have at the moment. Okay, so basically, I'm not here to talk about the centralized network. You've probably known about it all your life. I'm talking about the decentralized networks. Why? Because it is the future of leadership. It's the future of commerce. It's the future of finance. And we're just going to go right into it. And I believe it's going to create an encounter of an experience for everyone. Now, the second animation you're seeing is also a kind of decentralized network, but it's a dynamic kind of it. I usually call this kind the hybrid kind of network. Okay, now it can have a life of its own. It can have a system on its own, but there are still given laws, that defines how communication, how locomotion, and how the eventual result is actually going to look. So basically what you're seeing on the screen now are different entities. They have different sizes, meaning they have different levels of influences, different resources, different potentials, different power, but they still communicate in a certain way in which things are moving in that particular light. Okay, this is the beauty of a decentralized system. Everyone is able to make decisions by themselves, but these decisions are still kind of connected to the global or the major purpose of the whole system. Okay, so we're going to go a bit deep into it and we're going to cut it down. For simplicity's sake, when we're talking about decentralization, it is basically the transfer of control of an entity or an activity or an organization to several local offices or authorities rather than a single one. which is practically what I said a moment ago, where decentralized is you break that central power in such a way that the whole of the resources, the whole of the authority, the whole of the power is not at a certain point. Okay, now that's why a lot of resources go into security and classification of information and all of that, because there is a central point of government. There is a central point enemies can attack, that once they attack, the system is down. It's kind of like the system will strike the shepherd and the sheep is going to scatter. That is a centralized form of system. But when we're talking about, what we're looking at is, you don't know where the shepherd is, but you know that there is activity and things are working the way they should. So let's look into the advantages of a decentralized network. Okay. For example, we've got growth and diversification. The ability of a decentralized network has in it the potential for phenomenal growth. Okay, now it's kind of like raw power. It needs a bit of structure to give it purpose, but it doesn't take away from it that it has that potential to do amazing things. The second advantage of a decentralization network is quick decision making. While in the centralized system, all decisions are made by a central point. And sometimes it takes a lot of effort to communicate feedback to that central point, and might take a bit more time also for that central point to disperse that information and the decisions that have been made, to the basic people. And that's where the problem. Which is something you get to have in a decentralized network. It's easier to communicate because it's more of a peer-to-peer form of communication. And so you don't have to wait for someone to call all the shots. Everybody seems to know the right thing to do because there's a purpose and there's a system that makes everything work. There is also better supervision and control because everyone is now responsible for his own household, and how well you do or how poorly you do is based on your personal skill, personal experience, and everything you're supposed to put together to make things work. It also brings the place of satisfaction of human needs, because resources can be spread across, and everyone can work together in a more harmonious manner. It also does give a bit of relief to top executive. What it means is that all the burden is not being put on the executive, so they also have the time to strategize and think about the future. We're going to talk about the hybrid system sometime very soon. Everything that has an advantage also has a disadvantage. So some of the disadvantages of decentralization is, one, it's difficult to coordinate. When you have everybody doing what seems right to them, it might be difficult to bring order and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Also, external factors can be very disastrous because at a point where no one wants to take responsibility for certain things, everybody thinks the other person is going to do it while the other person is thinking that the next person is going to do it. Eventually, no one gets to do it. That is usually a problem that comes up in a decentralized network. The third thing is it is very expensive to manage. Okay, there is a whole lot more of costs involved to make sure that a decentralized network works very much. So it's not able to be scaled. So it's more of like a diseconomics of scales. We might talk about that as well as we move on. So our basic scope in today's session is three things. So we're looking at how leadership comes into decentralization, how commerce comes into decentralization, and how finance obviously comes into decentralization. So we're going to be looking at that pretty much soon. Let's start with government. Government has to do with the structure of people in a given area, how the management of resources, communication, and also the security of those people comes in place to it. Government is that instituting authority that makes things work. Now, a little bit more about the scope of government. Areas like religion, government is, whether we realize it or not, religion is a form of government. We also have the place of law and custom. Legality is very important in government. One of the things that gives government power is law and customs. Who decides how we live? Who decides what we do? Who decides the way we conduct our business? Rules, laws, policies, and that's one of the things that government also has judiciary of. The other thing is culture and identity. Okay, what is the language we speak? What is our currency going to be? And all of these things is also the prerogative of the government. Security is also the responsibility of the government. Every territory that is not fully secure, it means the government is not as optimally efficient, as it should be. So when we're talking about good government, we have certain areas like transparency, accountability, following the rule of law, how responsive and responsible the government is, equitable and how inclusive the government is, also the place of consensus oriented, where it doesn't seem like you're partisan. Okay, you have to be non-partisan when we're talking about government. Now we're going to touch a bit more about that very soon. Let's go into a bit of commerce now. Commerce dictates how trade happens. Okay, how you get money, how you get things, how you make things happen. It's all about commodities and sales of people. So how do you make sure that, or what are the rules, or what are the roles, or what are the structures that you have in place that determine how business is conducted? Okay. In the future, things are going to be a bit more decentralized, and we're going to talk about that as well as we move on. So the scope of commerce includes business, and obviously business affects the environment and the economy. And also transportation is very important for business in getting goods and services from one place to another. Now, while you're conducting all of that business, insurance is also key, because that is what safeguards the value of what you're giving, whether it's a good or a service, and everything works with communication. So when we're talking about decentralization, we must begin to look at how decentralization affects the business system, the economic system, the transport system, the securities and insurance system, and also how do we keep communication encrypted and as personal as it can be. Okay, so that's the area of the commerce, business, trade, and all of that. And closely related to that is finance. Obviously, the purpose of doing business is to get financial satisfaction or security. Okay, so when we're talking about finance, we're looking at the business. We're looking at the business finance, the areas of investment, financial institutions as well, venture capitalists, basically what makes money move. What makes an economy stable? Okay, how much cash do we have in a system to make sure that things are working and things are going the way it should be? This is the jurisdiction of finance. Okay, so when we're talking about decentralized finance, is DeFi, that's what it's being called. So that's the system that makes sure that the process of value, the process of transfer of finances, of cash or money, and the movement of currency is done at a decentralized level. Okay, there's a whole lot into it. That's where blockchain comes into it. That's where all of the cryptocurrencies, also have their place at the game. But the thing we need to understand here is that every system is under attack. One of the beautiful things you get to see from the year 2020 is 2020 came to reset a lot of things, came to shake a lot of systems, and it exposed how centralized systems can be vulnerable. When centralized systems are vulnerable, it's not a good thing. It means that if anything happens to that particular system, the system collapses. Okay, and we don't want this to happen. Now, the future is already dragging into us, and we are already seeing evolution. We're already seeing change. We're already seeing how things are working together, technology-wise, the digital society, artificial intelligence, blockchain, virtual reality, stem cells, robotics, terraformation of planets, and all of that. There is so much, and all of these will bring their own problems with it, but all of this can also cause problems for the existing systems that we have here. So there are a bit of institutions that are evolving and also that are under attack. The first is democracy. You need to understand this, that democracy is under attack. Democracy is under attack. Democracy is known as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But now it's difficult to really know who the people is, because by the definition of people, they must have common language, common interests, common purpose. They're thinking in the same lines, and they are still connected in some way. But in the world that we are now, there is so much diversity that it is difficult to get the people together. Okay, so when it comes to leadership, there's going to be a big problem when it comes to institutionalizing democracy globally. Okay, and we're already seeing problems all across with protests and all of these things. It's just going to improve. It's going to increase until there is a better system of government than democracy. Now, we also do have the fiat, which is the physical cash. It's evolving for cryptocurrencies. Okay, we're having digital currencies now, and even with the whole thing with the COVID-19 and all of that, it lets us know that having paper cash might not really be in the best interest of the people. So many nations are already looking into digitizing their currencies just to make sure that the values change. And we also need to know that with this is going to come a bigger problem. Okay, who is going we also need to understand that as these things begin to happen, things are going to change, things are going to improve, and we need to see how all of this makes things better or can make things worse. Okay, so money is going to be a big problem in the future. What would define money? The definition for money is going to change. And, we have central banks of nations. That's going to be a big problem. They're going to be a big problem. Okay, so instead of having central banks, we might begin to have decentralized systems for banking, the storage of money, investment, and value. And that's where we have things like smart contracts, and all the form of cryptocurrency applications that we have at the moment. So as a result of a change in finance, the business models are going to change as well. The current business models we have are crashing. Okay, the world of business needs to evolve. Some people are already catching on to it, while others aren't at the moment. Okay, but the future of business is decentralized. Every state, every process of your business needs to be decentralized. And the earlier you start thinking about this, the better. Okay, it's a movement, and there needs to be more systems in place that makes it easier for businesses to transition into that. So for someone who is listening right now, this might be a very good point of entry for you in order for you to make your wealth, because you'll be solving a problem that people don't really know that they currently have, but it's going to be a very big problem in the future. Now, with all of the three things I've mentioned, there will be new policies and ideologies which will seek to replace the old one. And policies don't go easily because there are people who have amassed their wealth on certain policies. So a change in policy would mean you're breaking and truncating that wealth, so there might be a bit of tussle of power here and there. Technology is also evolving. It's changing everything: business, money, society, communication, social media. Everything is changing, and we need to begin to adapt to it. The final thing I want to mention with this regard is terraformation. By 2024, it was a goal has been set to begin to terraform Mars. So people like Elon Musk, even Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson, they're all working towards improving transportation, locomotion, and even going outside the space of Earth. So that's going to be something to look out for, and it's going to change how things go. The moment you have people beginning to live in places other than the Earth, our systems change, and get ready for a bit more of disruptions. Okay. Now, while all of this is going on, where will you be? What is your place? And that's very important, and it's one of the things I really want to emphasize to you here and now. Something you have to put in focus. But here is the thing. Now, we need to understand that everything that has happened will happen. And there is a point that everyone gets to know that there is nothing new under the sun. Everything probably has a new name to it, a different appearance, but there really is nothing new. Everything is being recycled. The principles are being recycled. The systems are being recycled. Different people are just taking it up. People are dying. People are taking their places. But basically, it's still the same system. Invaluable, spiritual, metaphysical, they're still all the same thing. Now, one thing when we bring into the focus of Nigeria was the protest that happened sometimes in October, which was tagged the End SARS protest. Now, the important thing I need you to understand about this, it's a good sign for Nigeria, because this is one of the first time in modern times that we had a decentralized system at work, okay, until everything fell apart, actually. And that's one of the disadvantages of decentralized system. There is a point where you need to begin to put rules, laws, and structures into it. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. The key thing here is that youths came together, pooled resources, they had a common cause. Everyone was tired, there was emotion, and they were able to rally together in a decentralized form. The government was against it because the government operates a centralized system of government. But that really challenged the system. And this is the point, and it shows that the future of Nigerian leadership can be decentralized in a way where it's no longer certain people who stand as rulers or leaders over the people. There is more to look out, especially in the Nigerian country, about what the next couple of years is going to be like. There might still be other forms of protest in this same vice, when it comes to the government against the people. Now, the next thing is when we're looking at finance, the areas of fiat and cryptocurrency. Now, fiat is all about the paper cash, the bills, the coins, and all of that. The cryptocurrency is interesting in a way because while most of fiat, what determines the value of fiat is oil and gold mostly. The other thing, of course, they have supply, demand, and all of that. But basically, it's oil and gold. Okay, now cryptocurrency doesn't work that way. Okay, it has a decentralized system, and the way in which its value increases or decreases has a lot more to do with the response of people to the market. Okay, so what we'll call value in the future is going to be highly, I wouldn't use the word dissolved, but it's going to be disrupted. Okay, so how things, our perception of value and what we'll begin to use that value for will change how our system and everything runs. So this financial system is going to be disrupted from this next decade. We're looking at 2021 up until 2030. The way we trade is going to be different, and every country, well, many countries will begin to open up to a more decentralized digital currency form. Yes, at the beginning, there will still be some form of structure because it's very difficult to move from a totally centralized system to a totally decentralized system. And this is where I'll be talking about the hybrid system sometimes very soon. There is a lot more to look at when it comes to finances, and it's going to change how business is done and also the quality of the treasury of companies and countries. Religion is also going to be highly disrupted. Religion is going to move from a centralized system of belief to a decentralized system of belief. Okay, it has its pros and cons, by the way. For there are many religions that believe in one God, or that's a monotheistic system. We have polytheism, is where religion believes in multiple gods. But the issue here will not be in the theism, that's the gods, but the relationship and the approach to these gods. Okay, it's going to be decentralized, meaning that there won't be totally one way or the way the old religion has said it. What this means is that there will be new ways that will come up, and there will be new systems of communication, of reaching. Why is that? Because culture is going to change, technology is going to improve, and therefore our state of consciousness will make it easy for us to begin to express ourselves in higher dimensions and in higher ways that were not available a century ago or about 500 years ago. Now, decentralization, like I said, there's nothing new under the sun. We find decentralization in nature in multiple ways. So, for example, what you're seeing on the screen right now could mean different things. To someone, it looks like the stars. It could be electrons, it could be cells or frameworks of internet of devices and connectivity. What it means is that there is some form of decentralization, even in the centralized network, especially when you are going into more personal and specific nature of individuals or atoms or molecules or protons, as the case may be. The first thing I want us to look at is you. You need to understand that your cells is decentralized in its systems of operation. Okay, your blood cell. Now, cells communicate with one another. Okay, even though there is still a common programming in every cell of the body, your DNA is responsible for that. But every cell knows how to communicate with other cells. Now, the way efficiency is done, which cells does what cells goes where, what is responsible for that minute interaction between the cell here and its surrounding cells, the system of its operation is decentralized. Okay, now if that is what happens inside your body, imagine how efficient that system is. Now, there are parts of the body that are centralized, and they are centralized for a purpose because they are the parts that keep you alive. Areas like your brain, your heart, and all of that. If they stop, you're dead. Okay, so there needs to be some form of involuntary activities to it, okay, is subconscious or unconscious part of it, because you cannot be relied upon, to preserve that part of you. So that's where decentralization starts in your body. Now, we also have ants. Ants have been studied for a very long time. And the way the ant colony works is a highly sophisticated and decentralized network. There are many studies that have been conducted about the ants, and I want you in your spare time to be able to do that as well, and see how they communicate and how they're able to be efficient, even as little and as seemingly weak that they appear to be. And the third thing I also want to mention is the stars, the galaxies, the constellations. Okay, they work in so decentralized systems. The universe there is so much in the universe that we have no idea. There are more unseen forces in the universe than there are seen physical forces. Okay, and everything relates and connects with everything in some way, in some type, or in some form. Okay, and we also need to understand that human communication, the way we communicate with ourselves naturally, is decentralized. But as we begin to grow in number and interest and things begin to pop in, then there's some form of management or control might be needed, because just to make sure that people don't go out of order or out of the system. That is why the importance of that centralization comes in. But naturally, individualistic sense of it, human tend to have a bit more decentralized structures with us. So let's take a look at how decentralization works. Now, this is where it gets a bit more systemic. The first thing is you need circles. Circles talk about people who are coming together, having the same tendencies, the same interests, and there is a form of emotional connection as well. I use the NSAS protest in Nigeria as an example. You also have ideologies that bring people together. When people believe in same things, they tend to work around the same ways. Even though they are not being monitored or controlled, the results they tend to give is always geared towards certain things. We also have the place of catalysts. These are the people who will start up the reaction. Okay, the people who will speak, they're usually charismatic. They're the first point of leadership people see. But it is not the first point of trigger. Everybody already has that tendencies. But in the working of sociology, people sometimes just need that push. And the catalyst as a person are the people who make these things happen. They're the ones who will make their stand, or make clear definitions about how people should behave, act, or move. And then the whole system now rallies around them. You also need to understand that there cannot be decentralization without centralization. So there needs to be some form of pre-existing network that might no longer be as efficient as you'd want it to be. And so decentralization might be a way of introducing chaos into the system. You have to shake it up and trigger it, just like the systems in the world are being shaken right now. And there's a lot of disruptions happening here and there. And then you also have the champion, which is now that person that takes responsibility on how the system will work. Remember, when we're talking about decentralization, it's not about controlling people. It's about making sure that a system is intact and is going and is being run the way it should be run. Okay, so when we're talking about the hybrid system, there's a difference like what you see on your screen. On your far left, you see the centralized system. Okay, so the data management office is just one, and every other business or entity is feeding from that central point. So what that means is that if something happens to that central point, it's a total loss for everyone. Now, if you go to your far right as well, which is the decentralized system, okay, you notice that every business is working on their own. The connection between every other business is not compulsory, is not straight, is not very much activated. That's why you see them in dotted arrows. But when we look at the hybrid system, there is a central data management office, but there is also a data management in the businesses themselves. So what does that mean? It means that if something happens to the central system, because each business already has in itself a system that makes it work, it's easier to recover that central system. Or if it happens to any other business, they can just copy the code from the central system. Okay, so the human body actually kinds of work on a centralization, decentralization hybrid, in which there is a central point, but a copy of the program in those central points are also available in different areas to access for recovery and so. So for example, when you get sick, how do your cells recover? When you have a tear, how does healing happen? Certain codes are ignited and put in place that brings about the recovery of that process. Okay, so some schools of thought believe that the hybrid system is actually a bit better because on the long run, it kinds of brings to the balance between the two entities, as it were. So you still need structure in a decentralized system. Like I mentioned before, it is not just a centralized system. When we're talking about structure in a decentralized system, the structure is not talking about people. It's talking about the system itself, the rules and the laws that govern that system. Okay. And this is where how you should begin to think. Start thinking in terms of systems that will bring people in. And that's how government is, and how that government needs to revise, the way it does its things. So you have to make sure that what gives structure and rules, now by rules, we're talking about principles and values, are not actually people. Okay, no, people can come into the structure you have created, but do not make the emphasis on people who will be as the central point of power or decision in any given system. The next thing is that you have to be cost effective, because a decentralized system is not cost effective. It can be very expensive. But when we're talking about the hybrid, the sure way to go is to use other people's time, other people's resources, and other people's energy as you give them freedom. Now, the freedom you're giving to them is the structure and the system you have created that make it easy for them to be free and experience some form of freedom, that is different from what a centralized system offers. So businesses need to begin to think like this. Companies need to begin to think like this, and even we need to see how finances come into this particular system. So how can someone use his time, his resources, his energy, because there's something is getting from that system that a centralized system probably is not providing. Okay, so the community system structure of a decentralized system is that it makes it easy for people to join the movement. So when we look at companies like Facebook, like the social media on Facebook, it's easy to join Facebook. It's easy to have a Gmail account. This operates a decentralized network. Now, there is still the Google system, okay, that tells you how the mails look like. Facebook tells you there's a structure. You cannot recode Facebook. That system is already there. But that system gives you the freedom that you probably not have on your own. Okay, and that is the beauty of a decentralized system. Okay, so you have to keep the rules, you have to keep the system running, but you have to make sure that everyone who comes into the system enjoys more degrees of freedom than they are currently getting. And that's one of the things you get from decentralization as well. Now, one beautiful thing, well, it might be a beautiful thing or it might not, in a decentralized system is chaos. Okay, chaos means you have higher degrees of freedom. And what that higher degree of freedom does is it triggers creativity. In a more centralized system, it's difficult to be creative because there's someone at the top who is dictating what you should do. Okay, but in a decentralized system, you have the propensity and the creativity to do what you feel works. Okay, and there are certain rules. There's competition, in a decentralized way where you get to see what everybody's doing, but we're not competing against anyone. We're competing against the next stage of development, and everyone is moving together because it's just like an open source program. So you have an open source for software developers, so you don't have to reinvent the wheels. You don't have to start from the scratch, and you just go all in. You use what someone has used before, you improve upon it, and that's how the system begins to move a lot further than when it's a centralized system where someone determines what happens and how a system goes. Okay, so we need to work around all of that. But the key thing here in a decentralized system is knowledge, especially the person who runs the system. Okay, knowledge must be an advantage. There must be something you're bringing into the system that empowers people. If people aren't being empowered, then you might not have a lot of people who would want to stay in that system. Look at Facebook. What does Facebook do? Look at Gmail. Look at Google. What do? They empower you to live your life innovatively. Okay? You didn't tell them to create it, but they thought about that solution and how it's going to improve the quality of your life, and then you can come into the system and then make things better. They get feedbacks from the things you do, and that helps them to improve on the quality of the system. Okay, so you also need to learn to facilitate this desire for people to contribute. So Wikipedia is a very good example. There is no central system in Wikipedia. By central system, I mean anybody can submit an article, anybody can edit an article, and that is why eventually the quality of the information you get on Wikipedia is very excellent because there is no centralized system that determines what is. Of course, you have people who check it and to make sure that things are still in line with the rules and the systems. Okay, so the point where it's okay to have a form of centralized approach is when it comes to the rules that governs the system, the policies that govern the system, and how things are supposed to be run. But when it comes to what people do and how people do the things they do, this is the freedom you're supposed to give them in a decentralized world. And it's one of the things you're also getting from cryptocurrency right now. People have the ability to move their money how they wish. Of course, there are pros and cons, and people can use it for sinister means and all of that. But it does not change the fact that it has the ability to change the world in more phenomenal ways. Okay, so in order to be good at it, you have to monitor the system. So there's a way of thinking that builds a decentralized system, okay, that builds a decentralized system in such a way that the system can begin to grow on its own. Okay, a decentralized system grows better because people are creative, people are expressive. There's no one who determines what people do or what people don't do, or how people do the things they do. That is the beauty of a decentralized system. And in order for us to begin to move into the decade we're going into, we have to begin to think decentralization. Many of our lives, most of our life, it's been a centralized system that has crippled our creativity. We need to unlock it and begin to see things in different ways. Think about it. Everyone who has been innovative in the last decade, especially when it comes to technology, is engaging a form of principle of decentralization. Are you thinking Mark Zuckerberg? Are you thinking Jeff Bezos? Are you thinking Elon Musk? All of these guys are breaking the rules of the centralized system of commerce and trade, and they are bringing innovative ways that is doing what? That is bringing in more people, allowing people to do their things, giving them more degree of freedom, and that is how the system begins to grow. Now, here's the thing. The systems that will become very wealthy in the next decade, that is starting from 2021 up until 2030, will be systems that understand how to use decentralization to solve people's problem, but more importantly, bringing people into the system in order for the people to improve the system. So what you're doing is you're using other people's time, other people's resources, other people's creativity to build the system. And this is where a feedback system really works and make things go the way it should. So the future is not cast in stone. You have to understand this. How the future goes from now is dependent on the choices that you make. Now, decentralization is not something we can talk about in 45 minutes. There is a whole lot to it. But I believe that this is going to open you up to realities and potentials and possibilities to think things differently. One of the best areas for a decentralized system to work well are in underdeveloped countries, because they are able to connect more with the cause. They're able to understand the value of a higher degree of freedom. Okay, so if you're able to rush into this and make this work, remember, knowledge is the name of the game as well. You must really know your onions. But I cannot overemphasize what the future holds for anyone who is really ready to put in the work, connect in such a way, and begin to think decentralization. Now, it's very important that I say this. Everyone who has registered for this event via their emails, I will be sending certain information to them, including videos and content that is going to help them to better understand how decentralization works and how you can begin to use it from the point you're at now to the point where you can begin to build something phenomenal from it. So this is where we're going to be pulling the curtain for this particular session, but there will be more. I need you to understand this. One word you should begin to look out for from next year is decentralization. Decentralized applications will come, decentralized portals, decentralized finance. We already have cryptocurrencies, and we'll start having decentralized businesses. As cryptocurrency begin to improve in value, people will begin to do business in decentralized network. And so it's important for you to begin to understand how to set up the systems and how these things can work for you. And I would also share some of the contents that I have in this Vice with everyone who has registered for this event via email. On a closing note, the future is beautiful and the future is disastrous. It depends on the choices you make and how you are able to bring the positive causes with the positive intentions in order to create the products that will change the world and make the world a better place. All right. My name is Harkheindzel Kenny Omiyale, and I really want to appreciate everyone who is online right now and everyone who's going to, watch this sometime in the future. Decentralization is key, but you must understand that it is not all good, it is not all bad. It takes the shape of whoever is using it. Have a wonderful day. And this is where we will be closing the curtain on this session today. More of the information will be coming, hopefully, on this channel, different bits and pieces on how decentralization is changing the world and making the world a better place.